Greetings from the Asian Productivity Organization, and welcome to APO Productivity Talk, a series of conversations with international experts on transformative, productive-related topics. I'm Nobu Miyama, Program Officer at APO Secretariat, based in Tokyo, Japan, and your moderator for today's session. Today's P-Talk explores the topic, the quest for inclusive growth through accessible tourism. Tourism has long been recognized as a driver of economic growth and development. However, one segment with immense potential remains largely overlooked: accessible and inclusive tourism. Around 15 to 20% of the global population lives with a disability, and over 1 billion people are aged over 60. Yet many of them face barriers to enjoying travel experience due to inaccessible infrastructure, services, and information. Inclusive tourism addresses this challenge by enabling people with disability and older persons to enjoy equitable, safe, and comfortable travel experiences. Beyond a moral imperative, it is a major business opportunity. Accessible tourism is not just about ramps and elevators. It's about inclusive design, inclusive communication, and inclusive service, aligned with sustainable and customer-centric principles. To help us understand how accessible tourism can be made a reality, we are delighted to have with us today a global pioneer in this field, Ms. Neha Arora, founder of Planet Abled, a leading travel brand making tourism accessible for people with disability and elderly. Welcome, Neha-san. It's a pleasure to have you with us. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you, Nobu-san, for inviting me and allowing me to share my thoughts here today.
Before we begin, let me briefly introduce our speaker. Ms. Neha Arora is the founder and chief executive officer of Planet Abled. Born to parents with different disabilities, her father is blind and hearing impaired, and her mother uses a wheelchair. Neha-san brings over 40 years of lived experience into her work. After a successful career in IT and telecommunication with companies like HCL, Nokia, and Adobe, she launched Planet Abled to bridge the massive gap in accessible tourism. Planet Abled has since evolved into a global awarded full-service travel company, consultation platform, and training provider for accessible and inclusive travel. Thank you for joining us today, Neha-san. We are very much looking forward to your insights. Please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Nobu-san, for the very nice introduction. So the quest for inclusive growth through accessible tourism. So a little bit about Planet Abled before we move ahead, with the presentation. So we have been around as a service provider for disabled travelers, a destination consultant, and ecosystem builder for over a decade now. We want to mainstream accessibility into tourism ecosystems and frameworks so that destinations and tourism and hospitality businesses are accessible by design across the spectrum of digital accessibility, built infrastructure, and societal perceptions around disability. Some of our awards that we have been very grateful to have received from all over the world, and why we do what we do. So this is a picture of my parents, and they were married like that, and so that what brings me with 40 years of experience of making accessibility possible in daily ecosystems. And that is what I bring into tourism and hospitality. Let's start with understanding first, what is accessible tourism? So if we look at the definition, it refers to tourism that caters to the needs of a full range of customers, including people with disabilities, older people, and cross-generational families. It entails removal of attitudinal and institutional barriers in society and encompasses accessibility in physical infrastructure, transportation, information and communications, and of course, human accessibility. It encompasses publicly and privately owned tourist locations. And before we go ahead, why it is also important if you think that disabled people, it is not needed for them, it is also required by the United Nations Convention of Rights of Persons with Disabilities that gives people with disabilities and older people an equitable right to be able to access tourism and recreational services without any barriers, independently and in an affordable manner. And most of the countries are signatories to it. The question arises how much of these signatories have actually implemented accessibility into their countries. So, and accessible tourism has been mapped to 7 of the sustainable tourism goals, because we always talk about building a future which is sustainable, the SDGs 2030, and we are talking about sustainable tourism. But can we really talk about sustainability in tourism without accessibility at its core? Because we are leaving out a large spectrum of the population. Here is a few statistics to make you understand how big of an opportunity this is. Nearly 15 to 20% of the world's population has a disability, with over 1 billion people over 60, and 46% of them have a disability. And when they find a destination that where they feel seen or heard, they are most loyal customers and spend on an average 30% more than a non-disabled traveler. We have over 100,000 museums all over the world, 15 million food establishments, and over 700,000 hotels, plus 6 million plus Airbnb listing. But when we talk about what percentage of these being accessible, that is still in lower single digits. These places, these destinations or experiences remain accessible for a large part of the population. When we talk about accessibility, we are also talking about online accessibility. And when 68% of all sales transactions today around travel are done online, so digital accessibility is equally important. We have 80% of disabled people are employable age, but 80 to 90% of them in some countries remain unemployed. So they are not even part of the workforce. And labor participation of disabled people is 30% less than non-disabled people. And but let's talk about who are these people. These are people not just with, usually when we talk about accessibility, a picture of a wheelchair user comes into our mind. But the disabled people are not just wheelchair users. They can have a visible disability, or sometimes the disability might not even be visible. So this encompasses mobility impairments, visual impairments, deaf and hard of hearing people, people who are neurodiverse, intellectual disabilities, learning disabilities, psychosocial disabilities, and other hidden disabilities, and temporary disabilities as well. So, what are the challenges faced by people with disabilities and the elderly when they think of traveling or they want to participate in the tourism workforce? It is when you took off the travel content that is available online, because the travel does not start when they reach a destination. It starts when they decide to travel and go online and think, okay, where do I decide? How do I decide where do I want to travel and how? So the travel content remains inaccessible. The online booking platforms remain inaccessible, and information about accessibility of the destination. I am a deaf traveler. What the destination offers to me, is it accessible for me? Would I get accessible communication out there? Or I am a blind person, how many hotels would be inclusive and accessible for me? Information available in accessible formats. So, for example, you go to a museum, is it everything is behind a glass wall? So, are people with who are blind or who have learning disabilities are able to access these museums in an equitable manner? And when the participation of workforce income, because we are talking about productivity, right, today, which is an important core of how we can have inclusive growth through inclusive tourism. The work participation of disabled people is equally important, where they are seen or the required accessibility accommodations to participate in the workforce equitably are needed. Do they get that in the workforce? And do you see disabled people in leadership positions? Like, we don't see any representation. If there's no representation, how would they drive any change internally in these organizations? And of course, the fear of the unknown and the societal prejudice that comes with having a disability of or having any accessibility needs. So in 2023, Planetable did a consultation at the United Nations Vienna, where we brought together stakeholders from the tourism industry, like hotel chains, travel companies, museums, and people with lived experiences from developing countries and developed countries of various disabilities into one room. And the biggest finding was what a destination or an organization considers accessible. Hey, we are inclusive, we are meeting all legal compliances, and we are accessible for all. These are the green dots, right? And if you see the purple dots, which is the representation of disabled people, there is a huge wide gap in between that their expectations are not being met. So how we can work together for growth to fill this gap and bring everyone on the same page that disabled people have equitable participation in workforce and can have equitable, memorable travel experiences when they travel. And the destinations and tourism businesses are able to provide that kind of inclusive experience to them. Why this gap exists, because this is also important to understand, because there is lack of awareness and training and inconsistency in across the world when in different countries, what is a disability, what is not a disability, what is the law, like laws also differ across the world. And the implementation of that law also varies where you are in the world. Then there is a lot of perception and stereotype around disability that disabled people don't travel, or old people have to sit at home, they don't need to travel, or disabled people do not work in tourism or anywhere for that matter. So the market size hasn't been realized. This 15 to 20% of the world population holds $13.1 trillion of annual disposable income. But the industry hasn't recognized that they have such a strong purchasing power, right? And even if some of the organizations or destinations have implemented accessibility in the past, they haven't had proper return of investments onto that because they haven't been properly able to market themselves to the target audience. And let's look at what does accessibility in tourism means really. So it is not just limited to accessible built environment that you make ramps, elevators, or hearing loops, or some kind of like tactile tiles. It's not just built environment. It's also about accessible communication. Like, is the communication accessible? How would a deaf person order room service if they are staying at a hotel? Like, think of these very, very simple scenarios, considering the diverse set of travelers that might be staying or traveling to a destination, right? And then we have to have accessible technology in integration across destinations. Is a blind person able to navigate by themselves across the destination, across a hotel or across a museum, and are equitably able to access all of what this destination or museum has to offer for that matter? Do they have any tactile representations inside the museum, or are there any indoor navigation solutions for them to navigate independently? Then it comes to trained and sensitized professionals, because you can make like a destination or a hotel or a museum completely accessible by law. But if the staff is not trained, are not or are not empathetic to the needs of diverse set of travelers, then all of it is a weight. It is actually not accessible. And in this trained and sensitized professional, we also have to look at an inclusive workforce. Are there any people with disabilities working in these destinations in tourism and hospitality? Are they existing in leadership positions? Then information available in accessible format. Like if you are going to a museum, is there the fancy text, the all of so much text, that the storytelling that we have, is it available in simple language format for people with who are deaf or people who have a learning disability, for them to be able to access this information equitably? Or information about accessibility is available readily, because before I decide where I want to travel, I want to know, is this destination accessible for me? Is this hotel suitable for me? And then we come to the most important aspect, human accessibility, like the human aspect, because hospitality and tourism is all about people. It's not just about the destination or the history of the destination or the experiences. The humans run the hospitality and tourism industry. And these people, even though trained and sensitized, sometimes they will feel they might come across situations they are not prepared for. Can they adapt to the updated situation, or in a like unfortunately they just kind of freak out and don't know what to do? So they need to be able to figure out solutions as and when a situation arises, and be able to create those solutions to create an amazing experience for the disabled guest or someone who has accessibility needs. Let's look at the business case. So it's not just the holidays and the holidays and leisure travel that we are talking about. We are also talking about business travel, meetings and conferences and events travel, sports team travel as well. So when a disabled traveler is the consumer, so they are more and more getting into the workforce. So they travel for business. Then there are conferences happen all over the world, and events happened all over the world, like music festivals or concerts and stuff like that. Are they accessible for the diverse set of people? Sports travel, we have the Paralympics happening every 4 years, but even during every, like all across the year, the sports teams are traveling all over the world to participate in various competitions that are happening. And is that sports travel accessible? And when we talk about people being in the workforce, they have a very, very low attrition rate, because once they find a working place which is inclusive of them and their needs, they do not leave, right? And this is being led by the aging population, more and more people having long COVID after the pandemic, with war happening in so many parts of the world, and more recognition and awareness around disabilities, more data being developed, and self-identification of disabilities, as in more and more people are getting aware of their own disabilities. Like, for example, I am a late diagnosed person with ADHD, and until a couple of years ago, I had no idea I had ADHD. Right? So more and more people are now recognizing that they have invisible disabilities that have always existed. So why inclusivity as a business case? So you have a stable workforce when you have people with disabilities in there, because like I mentioned, there is low attrition rate, and with proper accommodations, accessibility accommodations in place, these people really are the most stable and with less distractions. And if you have people with disabilities in leadership positions, they drive inclusions in their business internally. You do not need to hire sometimes, the need for an external consultant goes down, because your internal team is driving the whole message around inclusion and accessibility. So you are accessible by design already. Market expansion. So we talked about 15 to 20% of the world population having accessibility needs. And when you include their families and friends, that goes up to 25% of the world population. So by becoming inclusive, you are actually increasing your pie of the business case, and increasing your revenue by millions and billions of dollars every year, because these people want to spend their money, and you're just creating products and services in tourism that are accessible to them. And with more and more aging population growing all over the world, this market is just going to increase. And you have an enhanced reputation all over the world that you are a brand that cares for people. You are a global leader in inclusivity, and setting an example for destinations worldwide. And of course, you meet the regulatory compliance. We have disability laws all over the world, and you are actually going beyond what the law asks you to do, because your focus is more customer centric rather than just focusing on legal compliance. So, apart from implementing international standards to make sure that your destination is accessible, you are putting a reputation across the world as well, that we are going beyond it. You're creating experiences which are more human centric, not just a checklist. And when we design for disabled people, like when we make our experiences inclusive in destinations, it actually creates a better experience for everyone, even your non-disabled travelers, right? Just to give you a very simple example, a ramp won't even just help a wheelchair user. It would also help a pregnant woman. It would also help older people. It would also help people carrying heavy luggage. It would also help parents who have children in strollers, or someone who has a temporary disability or a fracture. It like everyone can walk through a ramp, right? So it is a better experience for everyone. And you have a high return of investment, because your cost of acquisition goes down drastically because of customer loyalty. Because once they have found a destination that is inclusive of them, they just don't leave. They keep on coming and refer you to more and more people in their network, which is a very close-knit community. And what will set you apart? We talked about this, but comprehensive accessibility, like, even if you decide to become inclusive, to set apart from anyone else doing the same is, don't focus on one single disability. Think of all the disability as core, because one person can have multiple disability, like a family like mine. So my father is blind, is hearing impaired, also has Parkinson's. My mother is a wheelchair user. I have invisible disabilities, and we want to travel as a family. And there are more and more people all over the world who are there, and they are looking at not just arriving at a destination and finding accessibility, but also right from the start, going online, websites being accessible, travel content being accessible and available of information. Personalized service, expert knowledge. So you will build more and more experience over time by putting standard frameworks and practices into your policies and frameworks. Training your workforce and providing dedicated support to disabled travelers, and your own workforce and your own team with disability. And keep on going on, because inclusion is not a project you do once and you're done. You have to keep on developing yourself and making yourself better, and make everything part of a standard practice. And of course, we talked about having an inclusive workforce that reduces your cost of inclusion and accessibility implementation drastically, as they are their own self-advocates. Making destinations accessible for inclusive growth. So where you have to start and how you have to move ahead. You have to first evaluate where you are in accessibility. You might be doing some things already. And how do you go from there? Like, okay, this is what we do at the moment, and this is how far we have to go. So you have to build a roadmap over time and based on the resources that you already have, whether it's financial resources or human resources. Then you have to work on training your workforce on accessibility and inclusion, and then hiring people with disabilities in leadership positions. Mind you, this is very important, that because a lot of businesses hire people with disabilities in the blue collar workforce, but that though creates a good a story of a brand, but that does not change anything because they are not in the decision making position. So this is very important that they need to be in decision making space. Implementation, so whatever roadmap and resource allocation you have done, you have to implement it over time. You have to identify in the metrics that you would monitor over time to make sure how much of your business has increased, what is the kind of social impact you have made, how much of your workforce is now inclusive, has your attrition rate reduced by hiring people with disabilities, and you have to do a user testing and certification that, okay, does it work with real users also? That, and having an inclusive workforce makes it happen. You have your own team to do the user testing. You have to do market outreach and promotion and have a proper strategy that how would you actually reach out to the target audience, which is disabled or elderly and have accessibility needs. So just like you do it for non-disabled travelers, you have to make some changes in your market strategy to reach out to this audience as well. And of course, a periodical review of after you have made the changes, how it has impacted. Do you need to make some changes again, or are you following your best practices throughout, or there are some gaps that are coming in, and how you can fill in those gaps over time? Some of the good examples of destinations who have implemented accessibility. So Flanders is a small is a town in Belgium, and what they did was the city decided that we want to become accessible and inclusive, and they provided subsidies to their business owners. They said, okay, you just have to tell us that you want to become accessible, and we will subsidize the implementation for you. We will bear the cost. And here are the guidelines that you can do to become accessible. So after a while, more and more businesses implemented accessibility. And when they started seeing the return of investments on that they have, like the visitor number has increased, the average spend of a consumer has increased, and you have more and more people visiting the destination, they were proactive in then implementing accessibility in implementation, like initiatives in their destinations. And Emirates is has the first airline who is autism certified, but not just that. It was also the first airline who made their audio, visual, and entertainment systems in the aircrafts with captions and audio descriptions as well. So, like when a blind person is traveling or a deaf person is traveling, the entertainment system is accessible for them too. And of course, they are open for people with autism, not just limiting their accessibility to wheelchair users. So, this is a good business case. If an airline has come forward to implement accessibility, it means it makes good business sense. And inclusive growth results. So once you implement accessibility in your destination or in your tourism and hospitality business, these are just a few numbers that you would see over time. That you will have 30% more revenue per customer on an average because disabled people spend more. Your target audience has increased by 25% at least because you have expanded your pie of business by catering to a segment that was ignored before. High customer loyalty and referrals because your cost of customer acquisition goes down because most of your business is either repeat or through referral. And by having an inclusive workforce, you have your internal champions of accessibility. So your user acceptance testing, driving decisions around accessibility and inclusion by leaders with accessibility needs, you are driving it to the core. You are accessible and inclusive by design for everyone. And you have low attrition in the workforce. And your accessibility consulting cost also goes down because of your inclusive workforce. And you have a high social currency. It means you are looked up as a brand that is inclusive of everyone. So more people today, as we see tourism today, people are now traveling with companies or going to destinations which are implementing sustainable tourism practices or are doing good for the community or are being more conscious of sustainability. And this, you being accessible, this adds to your social currency. They're like, oh, I have a friend who has a disability, so I would also give my business to a company or to a destination that is inclusive of my friend, even if that friend is not traveling or that family member is not traveling, but they would still prefer a company which is inclusive or a destination which is inclusive. And overall customer experience has improved. So when we talk about uh, implementing accessibility, it creates a better experience for not just disabled people, but for everyone. And as we say, like when we talk about productivity, true productivity thrives where everyone's voice is heard, where everyone is seen and no one is excluded from accessing anything. The barriers are removed. And diverse perspective spark better solutions, better experiences. So when we talk about creating better destinations and creating better experiences, this is what diversity brings to it, and that is how your true productivity thrives and grows over time. Because inclusion is not just fairness, it is a force multiplier for performance. You must have even heard this very common phrase, nothing about us without us, which is like, nothing about people with accessibility needs can be done without they being at the core, or for this applies to pretty much everyone. And this is an ideal version of inclusion in tourism, which is very people centric. It is seamless, adaptive, and provides quality experience to everyone. It is intention led and intuitive, adaptive to the diverse set of needs of travelers or their own workforce. You kind of monitor real time data points against international standards and what you're providing as an experience at your destination. It is equitable in pricing. So we often talked about a disability tax, that people with disabilities have to spend more money when they travel because the destination is not accessible. So they always have to create their own accommodations if they have to travel. And this is not equitable if they have to spend more. Or there is still a gap in the quality of service that they get. So the goal is that accessibility and inclusion is mainstreamed and keep on evolving, and the solutions are easy and for all types of diverse set of people. Now let's talk about language, because when we are talking about growth, we are talking about productivity. Language is very important. So you have to look at people first or identity first language instead of euphemisms like differently able, specially able, people with special needs, or some regional language words that are used all over the world. People first language is people with disabilities, and identity first language is disabled people. So you are a person first or people first, and then you happen to just have a disability. And mind you, disability is not a negative word, it is just a word that defines a human form or a human condition. It is not an illness or a problem. People lived successful, healthy, wonderful lives and travel the whole world with a disability if the barriers to disability and to them are removed. So it is not something that can be related to an illness. And use appropriate language in oral and your informal speech as well. Just call the people by their names instead of poor guy or poor disabled person and stuff like that. They're just people who happen to have a disability. So having dignity in your conversations, just human to human, like disability is just a human feature, not a bug, so to say. And body language is equally important, like if it just talks about your personal space, you cannot touch an assistive device of a person without their permission, like whether it's interacting with their guide dog which is on duty, never do that, or touching their wheelchair or leaning on their wheelchair without asking them. It is impolite and non-dignified. And while you're talking to say a wheelchair user, do not ask questions about them from their caregiver or someone who is accompanying them, rather directly to them. They are very well fully capable of making their own decisions. Until and unless, of course, they have an intellectual disability or a disability that poses as a barrier to communicate. And when you're talking to a deaf person, there are so many ways you can communicate through, texting or writing on paper if you do not know sign language. So just be open to what all can be done and be respectful of their personal space and their dignity, that, no decision can be taken for them without asking them. That's very, very important. And where do we go from here? As either you are a destination or a business, you should start by first acknowledging that you should do more, and you should have a holistic approach and policy and roadmap, and have an inclusive workforce, and always recognize that there is a difference between developed countries and developing countries. So anything that has been a successful business case in, say, the US or UK might not apply to a country like India or Sri Lanka or Nepal, right? So you will have to take into cognizance the cultural differences or the legal demographic change, or how people consider disability, or what disabilities are recognized and what are not recognized. So you will have to customize it according to the demographics you are catering to. And there's no one size fits all. And you will have to have separate business models for each type of stakeholders, as goals are different. So like for the rules that apply for a museum around accessibility, and what applies for a hotel, and what applies for a destination or a tourism board will be different. So the strategy has to be built in such a way that, each stakeholder has their own set of business models to reach out. And you have to build your business models on data driven insights. I shared some data, but there is some other data also available. And if not, build a data capturing model of your own, so that over time you can know that how the destination has improved over time. And of course, your return of investment models, because tourism is business as much as it is good business. You need to have your return of investment of the money and the effort that you put into accessibility. And the customer and workforce go hand in hand. And it's not just the customer teams that have to be trained on accessibility or be empathetic. The commercial teams also needs to be aware of the product and service that they're selling and the destination that they're selling, and how that destination or that product and service cater to the diverse set of accessible needs. And of course, there is intersectionality, that you cannot put people into single buckets. Oh, this is a blind person, this is a deaf person, this is a person in a wheelchair, and then this is a person from the LGBTQ communities, or this is a Black person, or this is the person from the indigenous community. All of these identities can exist in one person. I mean, look at my father, for example, having 3 different conditions and being Asian, right? And also having cognitive loss. Or there is a girl on Instagram that is a wheelchair user, autistic, is also hearing impaired, uses sign language, and is queer, and is also Hispanic. So all of these identities can exist into one. So you cannot just say, I focus on one group of people. So all your strategies have to keep intersectionalities in mind. This is what we offer as a solution, as an organization. We design trips for people all over the world with any type of disability or combination of accessibility needs. And we help destinations become accessible by design, because of course, not everyone can afford a travel company, right? So everyone should be able to go to a coffee shop locally and find it accessible. And we have a training platform where we build the capacity and competency of other travel companies and hotel chains and destinations to become accessible by design. We consult to of course, make all of these stakeholders become accessible as well. We have a certification so that you have one-stop platform for all your accessible tourism needs. Again, we talked about it, so I won't get into the details of it. We can help you in your roadmap and policy, in auditing your destinations and your products and services, designing inclusive products and services, and even in your outreach and job role mapping when it comes to hiring an inclusive workforce. Just some of the pictures of a few of our experiences, what accessible tourism looks like, and this is what inclusive growth also looks like. We have people traveling all over with diverse set of disabilities and having amazing, fun,
Yeah.
memorable and
Mhm.
experiences. And yes, that's about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Neha-san, for informative, inspirational, and thought-provoking presentation, which helped us to broaden our horizon and understanding in inclusivity. You have also given our viewers practical and strategic perspectives on how destinations and businesses can build accessibility into their core operation. Your unique blend of lived experience and professional expertise brought the topic of inclusion in tourism to life in a powerful way. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much.
Now let's move on to the Q&A session. We've prepared a few questions that we believe will help further unpack your insights and provide our viewers with practical takeaways.
Sure.
Our first question is, could you throw some light on how organizations can build an inclusive workforce and how it can lead to growth over time?
Sure. So, like I mentioned in the presentation as well, it is important that you have an inclusive workforce, because then self identification and self representation comes in. So, how can organizations uh, go ahead with that? So, first, you have to identify one, what kind of a business you are, whether you are a destination, a hotel, a museum, or a travel company. Okay, so once we know based on what kind of business we are, we'll say, okay, we have to have a job role mapping around uh, various disabilities and people who are skilled or unskilled. And do you have the resources to kind of train and do upskilling of the like the disabled people? Like, let's start with that. If you have the resources, because you will have to tailor made a little bit, sometimes they might not be available with which exactly matches your job role, right? So if you have the resources, create a skilling program. Start from, okay, what are the disabilities we are going to focus on? Say, for example, deaf people work really well in housekeeping because they do not have to communicate with customers a lot, right? It is like a single person job, and they can do that. So your housekeeping manager, for that matter, and the workforce can be deaf or hearing impaired, right? For your website and your booking platform, you can hire a blind person to do that for you in your development team, who can do the user acceptance testing also, and also tell you in terms of how do you communicate with a deaf person, with a blind person in a restaurant, or how do they order room service and all of that. So it's like now we have more and more people like who are blind working in technology. So anything related to technology, you can have a blind person driving your technology stream, right? And deaf people also are great artists. So your social media team or your marketing and communications team could have deaf people in there, or people with autism, for that matter. They can really work great with user acceptance testing again, or creating your promotional material, for that matter, because they are very focused and less distracted on the if the work is well defined. So if your processes are very well defined, you can hire people with autism easily. Or as for a wheelchair user, they can be anywhere in the workforce if your built environment or your property is wheelchair accessible. So you will have to do a proper job mapping and resource allocation in terms of how much you want to invest in your upscaling, and yeah, according to customized for your job roles.
Thank you, Neha-san. Thank you for the explanation. It is also good to know that there are huge potential utilizing technology, promoting more inclusive workforce in our organizations. So building on that, let's turn to our next question, which focuses on the practical side of implementation and tracking the progress. So our second question is, how can organizations better monitor their growth over time when they implement accessible tourism?
Right. So, to monitor, you have to identify the impact metrics that you are going to monitor. So, for example, you decide, okay, we want to become accessible. This is the financial resources that we have allocated for it, right? And over the time, you have to take a timeline. Okay, in 1 year after implementation, after we became accessible, what is the our customer acquisition cost? Has it gone down because of referrals and word of mouth publicity by existing users? Have they had good experience? You need to have a constant feedback loop also with your disabled consumers, because as much as you have done enough, like there are so many diverse set of needs, you have to make sure that they are having a good time, and you know how agile you are or flexible you are to cater to their needs. And sometimes these changes or requirements are very, very, very small. Like, you know, as a hotel, we are now having a pillow menu for that matter. So why can't we have an accessibility menu? You know, so it's the same as that. So you have to see, okay, this is the money that we spent and how much our revenue is increased. Has our average revenue per customer increased over time in this 2 years? And our social currency has, how much it has increased? Are we a better looking brand in terms of the world? And has this inclusion measure, these inclusion measures that we implemented, created a better experience for the non-disabled visitors too? Because you have, if you implement a feature which is technically an accessibility feature, but it is used by non-disabled users as well, so that means it's an inclusive feature that works for everyone and creates a better experience for everyone. So identifying these metrics and monitoring over time would help you understand that it makes good business sense and it makes a great social impact sense as well.
Thank you, Neha-san. It was very insightful. It's helpful to hear how organization can use both quantitative data and qualitative feedback to measure progress, especially in the areas like customer experiences and accessibility performance. You mentioned about ROI, also brought the strategic dimension to the topic. Thank you. And let's move on to our final question, which look at the broader value of inclusive tourism beyond revenue. So our third question, the last question is, apart from an increase in revenues, how does accessible tourism impact a destination or tourism hospitality business in a positive way?
Right. So I think I covered a little bit in the previous questions and in the presentation as well, that you have a better social currency as like more and more travelers all over the world are now looking at destinations which are more sustainable or which are doing good for the community, or who are implementing practices that does not impact the environment in a negative way. So a lot of travelers are already looking at that. This just adds, implementing inclusive tourism just adds another dimension to it, because see, like we said, 15 to 20% of the population has a disability. So all of us know someone who has a visible or invisible disability. So we have people in our network whom we know have accessibility needs. So it is personal to all of us as much as we want to deny. With aging parents, every one of us will be impacted by it. And the culture of multi-generational families is also increasing. So when 80% of this population, which is a non-disabled population, is looking at destinations to travel to, or companies to travel with, or hotels to stay at. They are looking at these destinations and businesses who are more conscious of these factors, right? And becoming inclusive just adds as a cherry on the top of that cake, because okay, they are going beyond and they are inclusive of my friend, my family member, my parents. I will give my money to them. I will give my business to them. So your overall, the brand image that this is an inclusive destination that cares about me, where I feel seen, where my family members are feel seen. So I will go there. So you come across the world as a pioneer that is inclusive of all. So it's very this cannot be taken into ROI, but you will see it over time, that the brand image, that what you stand for and what you bring to the table and to your customers, and having an inclusive workforce, it does wonders to your destination and to your business. Like having an inclusive workforce. Imagine you're at a restaurant, and that restaurant is fully run by deaf people. The manager comes to you and tries to communicate either in sign language or using some technology solution, and you're like, wow, I had so much great fun, and I learned sign language while eating at this restaurant, even though it was just like, say, some basics alphabets or something. But you're like, hey, I took more back from this restaurant. I just did not had a great meal. I also communicated with a deaf person and I learned sign language. So maybe I should go again and learn more sign language. So this is how the ripples of inclusion goes off in society. And then there is like a kind of, as more and more people become aware, these people who are, say, coming to that restaurant would say, okay, maybe I should make my office also accessible, because why not? There's no reason that disabled people cannot be in the workforce. So they start hiring disabled people, and then they start becoming inclusive in their workplace. And this is how the ripples go on in the society and the community, which might not be the bringing more revenue, which it is already bringing, but also makes the world as a whole more inclusive. So, like, I'll give you my example. There's this one conference in India that they started around assistive technology a few years ago. And that person reached out to me after the first edition and said, I had met you and heard you at one of your speaker sessions. And that is what led me, that it was an event management company, that I should have a conference around assistive technology because there's none in India. So this is how the ripples go in the society, and we build a better planet for everyone.
Okay, thank you, Neha-san. Very comprehensive answers. And you
Thank
linked
you.
accessibility, like environmental sustainability, to enhanced reputation and visitor loyalty. That is, creating the lasting inclusive brand value for the destinations and organizations. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our Q&A session. Thank you, Neha-san, again for answering and our questions with clarity and depth and passion, also the presentations. Your insights have not only inspired us, but also have equipped us with concrete strategies to take forward in our respective context. So to our viewers, we hope today's session has sparked new ideas and awareness about the role of inclusion in shaping a more productive and equitable tourism future. Before we close, don't forget to subscribe to the APO YouTube channel for more upcoming productivity talks. Stay informed, inclusive, and productive. See you in the next session. Goodbye for now. Thank you, Neha-san.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.